Hello and welcome. You're watching News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Over the next 1 hour, we are going to focus on an issue that the entire world is quite concerned about at the moment. We live in uncertain times. On the one hand, there are growing economic hardships and the world seems to be tottering on the brink of a major recession, going by experts' forecasts. On the other hand, we have increasing strife, conflict, violence, and chaos in many parts of the world. Barely had the world come to terms with the Ukraine war, which is now in its second year, that we are now faced with a grave security situation in yet another country. Sudan is today a ticking time bomb. Over the next 1 hour, we'll deconstruct for you the Sudan challenge and why we all need to be concerned. So why is Sudan grabbing international headlines? And why do observers believe that the country is sliding into a civil war? Let's give you the basic facts first. Sudan is a country located in northeastern Africa. It is one of the largest countries on the African continent, spread over 1.9 million square kilometers. Sudan is also one of the poorest countries in the world, with 46 million people living on an annual income of $750 each. The population of Sudan is predominantly Muslim. Now, why is Sudan in the grip of violence? Why is the situation there spiraling out of control? The violence follows days of tension as members of the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, a paramilitary group, were redeployed around the country last week in a move that the army saw as a threat. What lies at the heart of these tensions that we are talking to you about? Now, since the 2021 coup, Sudan has been run by a council of generals led by the two military men at the center of this dispute. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the head of the armed forces and in effect the country's president, and his deputy, General Mohammad Hamdan Dagalo, better known as Hemedti. Now, General Dagalo is also the leader of the paramilitary group, Rapid Support Forces, which grew out of Darfur's notorious militias. General Burhan and General Dagalo are both looking to seize control of Sudan. This comes 2 years after they jointly carried out a military coup and derailed a transition to democracy that had begun after protesters in 2019 helped force the ouster of a long-time autocrat, Omar al-Bashir. In recent months, negotiations were underway for a return to the democratic transition. Both these men once had close ties to the former despot, Omar al-Bashir, who ruled the country with an iron fist, as we said, until 2019. And then these two same men helped oust al-Bashir in a military coup amid a popular uprising. The two generals have since fallen out and are now clashing over the planned integration of the RSF into Sudan's military. This triggered the current violence. But at the heart of this crisis is actually the personal rivalry between the two men over who will ultimately control the armed forces and the country.
مناسبة عيد الفطر المبارك وبلادنا أصابها جرح بالغ حيث سقط القتلى والجرحى وتشردت الأسر ودمرت المنشآت والمنازل، فالخراب والدمار وأصوات الرصاص ما تركت مجالا لفرح يستحقه أهلنا في كل ربوع بلادنا الحبيبة، فإننا لجد حزينون لهذا المآل، لكن يبقى الأمل الدائم في أننا مع شعبنا العظيم سنتجاوز هذه المحنة ونخرج منها أكثر وحدة وقوة وتماسك.
Now, many observers of the region fear that unless swiftly ended, the current conflict could well end in a civil war, with even regional and international actors cashing in for their own vested interests, ranging from money and arms supplies to territorial control. What do the two warring parties really want? General Dagalo has said that the 2021 coup was a mistake, and he has tried to present himself and the RSF as being on the side of the people. While he has some support, others find this message hard to believe, given the paramilitary forces' brutal track record. General Burhan, on the other hand, has said the army will fully hand over power only to an elected government, further sidelining civilian representatives who were expected to be a part of a power-sharing deal. But there are suspicions that both these military men and their supporters only care about their own wealth and influence and want to somehow cling to power using any means at their disposal. The continued fighting between forces loyal to the Sudan army chief and supporters of rapid support forces has quashed hopes for a ceasefire. Now, according to the World Health Organization, more than 400 people have been killed and over 3,500 injured in the ongoing fighting in Sudan in the last 1 week. Most of these people were civilians. Thousands have been forced to flee the capital of Khartoum. Some of the fiercest battles have taken place in Khartoum, home to almost 6 million people, most of whom are trapped in their own homes without food, water, and electricity. That's how bad things are. Much of the fighting between the two military factions is taking place in urban areas, and civilians have become the biggest casualty. RSF fighters have moved into densely populated areas. The Sudanese Air Force has mounted airstrikes in the capital. And every single morning since the 15th of April, residents of Sudan's capital have woken up to the thunder of airstrikes and the crackle of gunfire. Armed men have been raiding and looting homes. Needless to say, food, water and medical supplies are fast running out. Why are there fears that external forces could enter the fray and further aggravate the Sudanese crisis? Consider this. Arab countries in the Gulf region have looked to the Horn of Africa in recent years while seeking to project power across the region. The United Arab Emirates, a rising military power that has expanded its presence across the Middle East and East Africa, has close ties to the RSF, which sent thousands of fighters to aid the UAE and Saudi Arabia in their war against Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. Now, enter Russia, which has long been vying for access to Sudan's strategic Red Sea port. Moscow is in talks to build a naval base, creating a passageway to the Indian Ocean, in exchange for sending Khartoum more weapons and military equipment. This ties into Moscow's broader strategy of trying to expand its footprint across the resource-rich Sahel region, a crucial Red Sea trading route for energy shipments to Europe. On top of that, the Wagner Group, a Russian mercenary outfit with close ties to the Kremlin, has made inroads across Africa in recent years and has been operating in Sudan since 2017. The United States and the European Union have imposed sanctions on two Wagner-linked gold mining firms in Sudan accused of smuggling. While the US gives Sudan a hefty sum of direct government assistance, Washington's sway is undercut by the fact that the RSF has an independent revenue stream from its illicit trade scheme, effectively functioning as a state within a state. The Horn of Africa is already one of the world's most volatile regions. Now there's growing concern that the turmoil in Sudan could spill over into neighboring countries like Chad and Eritrea, creating a full-blown regional crisis. Let's now shift our focus to how India is being impacted by the Sudan crisis. Why should India worry about what's going on in Sudan? At least 3,000 Indians are currently trapped in the crisis-hit nation. Some 1,200 of these Indians settled down in Sudan decades ago. One Indian national was among the hundreds of civilians killed in the Sudanese capital. Many of the stranded Indians are professionals working in key sectors in that country. A sizable number of Indian business people who traveled to Sudan to finalize deals before the Eid holidays have been stranded in hotels in Khartoum. Prime Minister Narendra Modi today chaired a high-level meeting to review the security situation in Sudan. The External Affairs Minister, the National Security Advisor, the Ambassador of India to Sudan and several other senior officials were part of this meeting. Prime Minister Modi received a first-hand report of the conditions on the ground with specific focus on the safety of the Indian citizens in that country. The Prime Minister instructed officials to remain vigilant, closely monitor developments, continuously evaluate the safety of Indian nationals in Sudan and extend all possible assistance to them. He said India needed to prepare contingency evacuation plans, accounting for the rapidly shifting security landscape and the viability of various options. The Prime Minister also emphasized on the importance of maintaining close communication with neighboring countries in the region. Significantly, India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, has discussed the security situation in Sudan and ways to get stranded Indian nationals out of the war-torn country with the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, during a meeting in New York. Dr. Jaishankar has said, in Sudan, the UN, is at the heart of the efforts to establish a ceasefire, and that is key because at the moment, unless there is a ceasefire and there are safe corridors created, it is not safe for people to even come out of their homes. Dr. Jaishankar says the focus is on how to get the diplomatic processes to yield the desired result, which has to be a workable, on-the-ground, observed ceasefire. And then the next step would be to create safe corridors for movement, options for movement, and assembly points.
Most of our meeting was on the Sudan situation. We also, of course, discussed the G20. We also spent some time on the Ukraine conflict, but essentially it was about the Sudan. And in Sudan, the UN is at the heart of the efforts to establish a ceasefire, and that is really key because at the moment, unless there is a ceasefire and unless there are corridors, it's not safe for people really to come out. The UN is doing its bit, talking to everybody. We of course have obviously very strong interest in the matter because so many Indians are there. You know that in the past we have been in touch with a number of countries. I myself had spoken to the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia and with the UAE. We've been in touch with the Americans. I've also been in touch with my British counterpart.
India has been in contact with key regional players such as Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Egypt, and global powers such as the United States and the United Kingdom, since intense fighting erupted last week, and exploring ways to evacuate the stranded Indians. Officials say New Delhi has contingency plans in place to ensure the safety and security of Indian nationals. But for now, India has advised its citizens in Sudan to shelter in place amid the fighting. The government has asked Indians in Sudan not to go to the Indian embassy in capital Khartoum, where the fighting has been most intense. The embassy is near the airport in Khartoum. The Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Arindam Bagchi has told the media that they are focusing on ensuring the safety and well-being of the Indian community, including working on contingency plans and possible evacuation. He said, and I quote, "We are counseling and telling Indians how to stay safe. It's an evolving situation. The embassy is functioning, but we have told people not to go there in person as that zone is witnessing a lot of fighting. People don't live there. Nobody is inside the embassy building." He went on to say, "We have some sense of how many Indians are in Sudan. We don't want to talk about numbers and locations for security reasons. We contacted some Indians after seeing their social media posts. We are keeping a close watch on the situation." The emir spokesperson added, "We are also in touch with various UN bodies that are present there. The UN has a significant presence on the ground." Reports suggest India is in touch with Sudan's army and the RSF for information on ceasefire, humanitarian supplies and how to ensure a safe passage for Indians.
In terms of the situation on the ground, as you are aware, there's been an unfortunate death of an Indian national. His body is currently at a hospital. Finally, after a lot of effort, we have been able to get that body moved from his apartment complex into a mortuary in a hospital. And we are seeing how to get that body either back or his family evacuated. We'll see. Our embassy is in touch with the family of the deceased as well as the medical authorities there. Just to give you a sense, look, the situation on the ground continues to be quite tense. It remains very tense, which renders any movement very risky. Currently our focus is on ensuring the safety and well-being of the individuals wherever they are located.
Meanwhile, the Sudanese ambassador to India, Abdullah Omar Bashir El Hussein, has said the request of the Indian government for the evacuation of its nationals from Sudan is currently under consideration by the authorities. Remember, this won't be the first time that India will be carrying out evacuation operations on a massive scale to rescue Indian nationals stranded in a war-torn foreign country. Over the years, the country has undertaken gigantic efforts to ensure that no Indian is left behind in an adverse situation, away from home. Most recently, just days after the Ukraine war erupted in February 2022, India launched Operation Ganga to safely bring back all Indian citizens from that country. This involved enormous diplomatic efforts and outreach to the governments of both Russia and Ukraine, as well as friendly countries in the neighborhood. Of course, it also meant India sending flight after flight carrying aid, emergency supplies, medical personnel and teams of rescue officials to ensure the safe return of those Indian nationals. Multiple union ministers personally flew down to Ukraine's neighborhood to oversee the smooth conduct of these operations, in the process sending out the message that every Indian life matters. Back in 2020, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, when the world began going into lockdown mode and life came to a standstill, India launched the Vande Bharat mission and Operation Samudra Setu that brought back over 60 lakh Indians who were stuck in different parts of the world. In 2015, as conflict raged between the government of Yemen and the Houthi rebels, thousands of Indians were stranded and Yemen was not accessible by air due to a no-fly zone announced by Saudi Arabia. Under Operation Rahat, India evacuated nearly 5,600 of its nationals from Yemen. Further back, in 2011, India launched Operation Homecoming to bring back Indian citizens stranded in conflict-torn Libya. Under this operation, India evacuated a whopping 15,400 Indian nationals. And of course, who can forget Operation Airlift, when in 1990, over a lakh Iraqi soldiers armed with hundreds of tanks marched into Kuwait overnight. The royals and VIPs fled to Saudi Arabia, leaving the citizens at the mercy of the intruders. Over 1,70,000 of those stranded in Kuwait were Indians. The Indian government kicked off an evacuation process in which each of these 1,70,000 Indians were airlifted and repatriated to India. That epic saga later became the subject of a Bollywood movie. It is a long list of major evacuations carried out by India. However, the challenge that Sudan presents is a humongous one, and carrying out evacuations from that country may actually prove to be tougher than the evacuations of the past from war-torn countries like Ukraine and Yemen because of various geographical and geopolitical factors. So we're asking on the show tonight, what does the road ahead look like? How is India going to address the Sudan challenge to ensure every Indian is brought out of the conflict zone safely? To talk about that and to get answers to some of those crucial questions, I'm now joined by an esteemed panel of experts. We have with us Michael Atit, journalist in Khartoum, in Sudan, where intense fighting is currently underway. Ambassador Deepak Vora, former Indian ambassador to Sudan, is also with us, as is Major General A.K. Sivaj, defense expert. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Michael Atit, let me begin with you. Just how bad is the situation on the ground? According to the figures we have, more than 400 people have been killed and more than 3,500 have been injured in the ongoing fighting in Sudan in the last 1 week. Most people are trapped in their homes. Food, water, medical supplies are running out. What's the latest you can share with us?
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to also to both of your guests that are on the panel. The situation is there. Okay, let me begin with the latest. This afternoon, that the RSF has announced today that they are, upholding the ceasefire for 72 hours, which has actually not been holding at the moment. As I speak, shelling and exchange of gunfire is still could be heard within the downtown, as the battlefield concentrated so much within the past 7 days on 3 main strategic locations, including the Khartoum airport, which is adjacent to the military headquarters, in addition to the presidential palace. It is not clear who is controlling which location, but the battle and the fighting and exchange of gunfire in those 3 locations confirm that both parties are within or either around those 3 locations, and they're trying to every one of them is trying to overtaken the other one and control one or two of these locations. On the humanitarian situation, the situation seems to be miserable. There are reports of 70% of the hospitals that are within the downtown, and these are hospitals equipped with the very advanced health equipment. They are all shut down. They are all closed. Patients have run for their lives. The co-patients, working, the workforce and doctors, everybody ran for his or her life, and leaving the dead bodies along the street or in the buildings due to intensified fighting. So as we speak, Khartoum, within the Khartoum downtown, is at a curve of, an environmental disaster if no ceasefire has been observed and allow the volunteers and the health workers to go and bury the dead body in a dignified manner. Today is the first day of the Eid here for the Muslims Ramadan. In his first address and a first appearance over the past 1 week, the Army General Abdul Fattah appeared on a state TV, consoling the people, addressing the people, telling them the army is under control and the army will win the battle. So he needs the support of the people so that they're able to restore peace and stability in these African countries. So this intensified fighting also forced thousands of Khartoum residents to flee for their safety in the nearby towns and the nearby states. They are also facing a lot of robbery and theft along the road, which is also putting them at risk. Instead of staying inside and running for your life, you go and face a different scenario altogether along the road. It is not clear who is robbing, who is practicing theft on the road, but the reports are saying both the military and the rapid support forces are the one controlling the road, setting roadblocks for citizens not to leave the town. Hundred or thousand even of the international diplomatic missions are stranded in Khartoum. Most of the missions are surrounded around the Khartoum airport, including the Indian embassy, which is just a few meters away from the Khartoum International Airport. Some of them have evacuated to a little bit safer place. Some of them are stranded within the building for the past 7 days without food, without water, without electricity. So the situation is just miserable. At the moment, the idea and the idea of any evacuation is impossible at the moment, as the airport is one of the battlefields. There is no way for them, for any flight to land or take off. There could be some possible plan B at the nearest airport to Khartoum, which is in Al Ubaid or in the far north in Merowe or in Port Sudan. But again, how will you make it to those airports so that you go and be lifted to your country? That is the situation in Khartoum as for today.
Well, it is a very grim situation, Michael, that you just described for us and our viewers. I must tell you that our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Sudan right now. You're right, the humanitarian crisis is worsening by the day, and perhaps the worst thing is that nobody knows who really is in control. Let me go across to Ambassador Deepak Vora at this point. Ambassador Vora, it's a really grim situation. We are hearing about how attacks have been launched on civilians on a massive scale. There are tanks in the Sudanese capital. Airstrikes are being launched every day in the capital. Hundreds have been killed, thousands have been injured, thousands others have been forced to flee. People's homes are being raided and looted. The humanitarian crisis, as our guest from Sudan just told us, is worsening by the day. And then when we talk about the impact this has on India, the Prime Minister today chaired a high-level meeting. At least 3,000 Indians, we are told, are trapped in Sudan at the moment. And the External Affairs Minister has made it abundantly clear, till there is a ceasefire in place, till you have a safe corridor being created, people cannot even leave their homes. As somebody who served as India's ambassador to that country, so if you could explain to us the topography of the region and how difficult you believe it's going to be this time around for India to carry out evacuation operations to rescue stranded Indians from Sudan.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be on your amazing channel along with my colleague, General Siwaj, whose knowledge is far superior to mine. And I've just heard what our friend, the journalist, who obviously is from the south of Sudan, but based in Khartoum, was telling us. It was my longest stint as ambassador, a country that I grew to love dearly. First of all, to answer your question about civil war, Sudan is no stranger to civil war. It became independent on the 1st of January 1956. Civil war had already started. It continued off and on for 50 years, ended with a comprehensive peace agreement that gave South Sudan, the Kafirs, the African Kafirs of the South, the right to secede through a plebiscite. They did secede. Why did the Sudanese government agree to that? Because their back had been broken, their military was exhausted after 50 years of intermittent fighting, and a war had broken out in Darfur in Western Sudan. The Sudanese army couldn't fight the battle in Darfur, so they outsourced it to a bunch of criminals, crooks. The term is mawalis. They were told this is going to be a self-financing operation. You guys go around, do what you can, carry away the women, the children, whatever you can loot, that's yours. We are going to look the other way. At that point of time, ma'am, these people were known as the Janjaweed. Now, I'm a little surprised that you call them paramilitary forces. They are a bunch of unrepentant thugs. They are no paramilitary forces. They have no status in the present Sudanese constitution. There was some executive order saying that they are now going to be part of some kind of security setup, but that hasn't been ratified yet. So what happens is, ma'am, when there are all these atrocities in Darfur, the fellow commanding the Sudanese military there is a chap called Abdul Fattah al-Burhan, who is now the army chief and the head of the military government, and who commanded the Janjaweed, as they were known. Janjaweed means warrior on a horse, was a chap called Hameti. You just referred to him as General Hamdan Dagalo. The two of them combined to throw out Omar Hassan al-Bashir, the longtime dictator of Sudan, because protests had erupted against him. He was indicted for war crimes, crimes against humanity, all kinds of things in Darfur. They didn't want themselves to be involved with him. They didn't want their own names to be dragged into the controversy. So they dumped this fellow and they swore eternal loyalty to each other. I know both of them extremely well. I've met them several times. And then what happens? Then the fight begins over two things. One, the natural resources of Sudan. It has some oil. Most of the oil went when the South seceded in 2000. About 80% went to the South. The rest remains with the government of Sudan, with the Republic of Sudan. More important, what happens to these hundreds of thousands of the what you call the rapid support forces? What will happen to them? Will they be absorbed into the regular Sudanese army? They tried that with the fellows in the south, the Sudan People's Liberation Army. Ma'am, there's a bunch of, forgive my tough language, there's a bunch of jokers sitting in New York who decided that they would form joint integrated units between the southern rebels and the Sudanese military. You've been fighting these guys for 50 years, and suddenly some chap sitting in New York says, get into bed together and say, I love you. It didn't work at all. The fighting continued till the secession came. The same thing is going to happen here, man. Who's going to control? Who's going to take the top positions in the military? That is the question. Both these guys are filthy rich. They want to control the resources of the country. Will a ceasefire come? I doubt it very much. The Americans tried thinking that they have some influence. They have probably -0. The British, even less than -100. They are not liked at all. You know that any European-looking chap there is being shot at. Some ambassador was, his place was attacked, etc. There was a time some years ago when I was there was a bunch of rebels from Darfur who came all the way up to Khartoum, and at least a couple of Western ambassadors, no names, came running to my residence, which is very close to the airport, as was rightly pointed out, and sought refuge there. So what happens now? Ma'am, there are a number of players who are involved in this. We are looking looking at the kind of situation that has devastated countries in the Middle East and Africa, from Lebanon and Syria to Libya, Ethiopia, Somalia. Khartoum used to be one of the safest cities in the world. It no longer is. And may I also tell you that I have lost a very close friend's son, one of over 400 killed. Broke my heart. Who surrounds Sudan? We have Libya, Chad, Central African Republic, Eritrea, and South Sudan, which seceded in 2011. All of them have their internal conflicts, various rebel groups operating, etc. And then we have the outsiders with their own interests. Now we are told that the Wagner group of Russia is getting involved, has supplied some missiles to the RSF, and with that they've shot down one or two aircraft belonging to the Sudanese military. Whether that is true or not, we don't know. But when I was there, 2005 to 2010, we were still talking about the Wagner group. Russia is supposed to want a Red Sea port for its navy. Well, that is obviously true. United States and the European Union have imposed sanctions. They've imposed sanctions in the 90s. They declared Sudan a state sponsor of terrorism. All kinds of things happened because they had the Abu Nidal organization, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad. And later, by the way, a fellow whose house was very close to our residence, a chap called Osama, son of Laden, who was then subsequently, he went off to Afghanistan and so on. So what do we see coming? You've talked of civil war. It's not coming. It's there. Will there be a ceasefire? Very unlikely. If they haven't done it on Eid al-Fitr, it's not going to happen. What next, therefore, for Sudan? Ma'am, in the past, the Sudanese have gone through periods of great turmoil, but their robust affection for their country, Sudan, is apparent. Their warmth, their friendship, their support for outsiders, all this is very well known. So what I see happening is the two armed factions will exhaust themselves. The people will come onto the streets saying Sawra, the Arabic word for revolution. We saw that after the Arab Spring. That's going to happen. The people will descend to the streets. There'll be more deaths, but that is the only way that peace will come to this benighted nation.
All right. Ominous words there from you, Ambassador. A civil war is not coming. It's already there. Sorry about your loss, Ambassador. This is obviously a very difficult time for the people of Sudan. Like you rightly pointed out, there are just too many players and actors who are currently active in this current situation. And as always, it is really a war over resources. The question is what really happens next. We will come back to you, Ambassador, in a moment to talk about the India dimension to this story, the challenge that India faces as far as evacuating its nationals from the war-torn country is concerned. But let me first get a word in from Major General A.K. Sivach. Sir, whatever the claims and counterclaims by the two warring sides, fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, most people believe this is what's happening right now is a result of the personal rivalry between General Burhan and General Dagalo. This is all about who gets to control the armed forces of Sudan and the country itself. Given that there are so many actors involved, how do you see things panning out going ahead? There are many observers who are saying that there is a serious threat of this spilling out into the region. Today it is Sudan, tomorrow it could be Chad, Eritrea. And let's not forget that vested interests in the region are already active, whether it is Russia, whether it is the Wagner Group or other mercenaries perhaps.
Neha, I couldn't hear your question completely, but I could make it out halfway through. Now, the question which comes is, what are our challenges as on today as far as India is concerned? Now, the first and foremost challenge is how do we evacuate these almost 3,000 Indians which are now stranded in Sudan. That is the biggest challenge. And the challenge has become very complex because the Khartoum, which is the capital, where there is a runway, the airfield is not operational. And hence, it is very, very difficult for any aircraft to land there. That is point one. The second thing is there is a civil war type situation taking place. How do the people reach up to the airport or come to Indian embassy? Because the fight is taking place in the street between the military and the paramilitary rapid support force. Now, the point is that both these varying groups are not ready to listen to anyone. So, therefore, the point today is very important is how to evacuate there is about 3,000 Indians. So to me, it looks like as on today, staying where you are is the only solution till the time the situation slightly improve. Because the point is, the moment you venture outside, the possibility of your becoming casualties are higher. Because there is no one law and order, there is a total confusion, there is a civil war type situation prevailing. So there is a chances of you getting either killed or injured. Now, whether these Indians who are stranded there, do they have a wherewithal or a support system for which they can survive for days together? I suppose that is also a very important thing, that they must have something to stay put there. In the sense, they should have a support system in terms of food, rations, as well as some other liquid. So that is question which is becoming very important. Now, whom do we contact to evacuate them? There is no denying the fact we are contacting US, UK, Saudi Arabia, UAE, also United Nations. We are trying to speak to both the parties, whether it's a military commander or basically rapid support force. But so far we are not able to succeed. The ceasefire which is being promised between both of them has not been successful. Now, this is a big challenge. Now, remember when we are having this meeting, there were two main players which were also in addition to the Prime Minister and the Minister of External Affairs and NSA, were the Chief of Air Staff as well Chief of Naval Staff. The Chief of Air Staff basically has to make a contingency plan to evacuate these people from by air, because we have a capability of also landing an aircraft on a advanced landing ground or a half complete runway, that is C-13J Hercules. We have that capability. We will try that in case it is feasible and possible. The second thing, to make it look like the naval chief was also there. Maybe they are thinking if they can evacuate them in case by air it is impossible, is there any way that the evacuation can also be taken place by the means of the sea? If they can reach to the port and from there they can be evacuated. All this thing must have been worked out. They are trying. They are also in the same situation as what we are discussing. There is no easy solution to the problem today. The situation seemingly looks to be complex. We have done evacuation in past, but I think this is the most challenging and most complex, because there is no law and order. The situation on ground is so confusing that anyone taking chance to come out will become a casualty by itself. Now, this is a question number one, Neha, which you asked me. The another question come, what happened now? No, remember that this civil war situation now going out and spreading to other countries like Chad and Ethiopia are very high. And also the other actors and characters which are trying to make use of, whether it is Saudi, whether it is UAE, whether it is Russia, which is trying to now take a port there in the Red Sea, that is also very high. Wagner group coming into this, now trying to take its own pie of a flash, is again made the situation more complex, because Wagner group is a very notorious group which is now fighting from Russia side in Ukraine. So overall, the situation seemingly looks to be very complex. There doesn't seem to be very easy answer. It looks like that as of today, to evacuate our 3,000 Indians is an operation by itself. It is a complex operation. But the fact is that we have been successful so far in all the operation. I suppose Indians will be the first one to evacuate there. They are trying their best. They are trying to find out some workable solution. We have a capability and capacity to also land on a semi type of airfield which is damaged almost 50%. I suppose that is the way, Neha, we would have been trying, and we are trying to find out some solution. But immediately doesn't seem to be any solution. The immediate solution seemingly looks to be stay where you are, stay safe, keep your support system available with you in terms of logistic and supply. Neha.
You're absolutely right, sir, in pointing out that there are no easy answers. This is a very complex situation. It's not going to be easy for India to carry out evacuation operations. However, when we say the safest thing to do is to stay where you are, that itself is very challenging, not only because there are air raids being carried out and homes are being looted and raided, but also because emergency supplies, medical supplies, food, water are running out. There's no electricity. People are trapped in their own homes. They don't know who to turn to. In fact, the Indian government has said that Indian nationals should not even approach the Indian embassy in person because that zone itself lies in, a battlefield, as it were. So it's a very, very difficult situation. Let me go back to Michael at this point. Michael, as you can imagine, we are very concerned here in India about the safety of those 3,000 Indian nationals who are currently stranded in Sudan, most of them in Khartoum, the capital, which is witnessing the most fierce fighting. Now, you mentioned how difficult the situation is. There are really no air operations taking place at the moment. India's foreign minister has clearly said until there is a ceasefire in place and till the time you have safe corridors being created, nobody can leave their homes, leave alone be evacuated. And fact of the matter is that there seems to be no hope in sight, for a ceasefire. Therefore, how difficult do you believe it is going to be for any country like India to evacuate its nationals from Sudan at the moment?
An evacuation at this point of time is only possible if the two parties agree and uphold to a sincere ceasefire. That is one point. Number two, unless one of the warring parties takes over the control of the airport and restore, security and safety for international flights to come in and carry on the evacuation process, that would also be good. I agree with the general. He mentioned about the sea port, but then the sea port from here to like the Port Sudan is hundreds of kilometers, and for them to go through all the road up to the Port Sudan to be evacuated through the sea, it is also seemingly being impossible at the moment. So the situation is just complicated and unpredictable, as each of the warring parties is trying to control this strategic place as soon as they could, in order for the international community, maybe, or for their allies outside or in the region, to now recognize them and give them support and say, okay, now since you are in control, you could be, a possible force that can take this country and lead this country ahead. There are a lot of external force into this, as mentioned with through the ambassador and the general. But the situation in the ground here is, if those external forces could look into the serious, miserable condition and situation where citizens and humanitarian situation on the ground, they would do something to stop this fighting and allow any intervention so far, being a UN intervention, being the African Union intervention, or being the Arab League intervention into this situation, so that the environment is conducive for people to live and to carry on their normal life. So any evacuation at the moment, as I speak and I'm on the ground, it seems to be impossible.
Well, the big question, Michael, really is, can external forces intervene in Sudan at this point and resolve the conflict? Can the United Nations do it? It is expected to. India's foreign minister has said as much. But will the United Nations be able to do it? It obviously is a tough ask. Let me turn to Ambassador Deepak Vora. Ambassador, at the start of the show, I listed some of the biggest evacuation operations that India has carried out over the years. India has always been proactive in ensuring that no Indian is left stranded abroad. We've carried out operations on massive scales year after year to rescue Indians from war-torn countries during the COVID pandemic, what have you. However, given the current situation, how challenging do you think it is going to be for India to bring those 3,000 Indians safely back home, given that at the moment it seems there is no end in sight to the fighting, there is no hope for a ceasefire? And India says the United Nations has a big role to play, it has a major presence there on the ground, but clearly it seems to be completely helpless.
Well, the United Nations always has hundreds of thousands of fellows. They do nothing. In Sudan, UN stood for unnecessary. I know this backwards. I know this whole story about this racket that we refer to as the UN. Nevertheless, it's the only organization with a sustained and substantial presence. You've talked about India evacuating its people from other countries. Of course, we have the expertise and the experience. 2015, I think it was, you mentioned Yemen. Ma'am, let me remind you at that point of time, the Prime Minister of India spoke to his friend, the Saudi king, and we asked them to cease their bombing. They were bombing the hell out of the Houthis. Cease it for some time so that we can bring out our people, stop for 7 hours or something like that. They said we can't stop for 7 hours at a stretch. So over 7 days for 2 hours each, we'll stop and then you can evacuate your people, which we did. But there was a functioning government. There was someone we could talk to in Saudi Arabia, not in Yemen. We did speak to the Yemenis also, by the way, and said, keep your airport open. And they agreed to do that also, whichever government was in part at that time. So we were able to bring them out. Challenge today is, who do I talk to? I've been on the phone the whole morning talking to my buddies, my friends, my very close friends in Sudan, saying, can I help? And one of them said, look, we've run out of food and money. How do you help? I don't know. As far as the Indian community is concerned, it's very close-knit. Most of them are Gujaratis. They've been settled there for decades, if not centuries. And from, they're small-time traders. Some of them are in Khartoum, some in Port Sudan, many in Omdurman, one of the sister cities of Khartoum. So they are staying at home. They've been through the terrible period of the civil war. They've been through the terrible period of the Sharia law, when they used to go around chopping off people's hands and so on, the government of Sudan. They've been through it all. They are survivors, and I know they will, but yet Mother India has a responsibility to her children. The ambassador that we have at the moment is an outstanding human being. He's a brilliant professional, and I know that we will find a way, as soon as there is a ceasefire and even half a possibility of a safe corridor for our people to go out, we will be the first to do it. As we did in Yemen, none of the Europeans were allowed to go in there, the Americans, the Russians, whoever. We went in and brought out nationals of 41 countries. We'll probably have to do it again in Sudan. Let me put it to you like this, ma'am. We have oil interests there, the Sudanese know it. We've trained hundreds of thousands of Sudanese, 30,000 Sudanese students are members of the Sudan Students Association of India, so to speak. We've trained them, we've helped them, we've invested there, etc. If there's one country that both Burhan and Hameti will listen to, that country is India. I hope they listen. I hope they remember what we've done for their country. And now this is payback time. At least allow us to bring out our nationals as well as others who want to be evacuated.
I really hope you're right, sir. I mean, it is heartening to hear you say that if these two generals are going to listen to anybody, that country is India, because that is exactly what we need at this moment. You believe it is payback time, but is that how the two generals are going to look at the situation? They're obviously right now, caught in a massive power struggle that has led to so much bloodshed in that country. General Sivaj, let me ask you this question. Ambassador Vora, is sounding somewhat optimistic, cautiously optimistic, saying that, India, while it's keeping its channels of communication open with all concerned parties, not just other countries in the region, but also the authorities in Sudan, he believes that, even the two generals who are at the height, at the heart of this dispute, are perhaps going to listen to India, pay heed to our request for us to be allowed to bring our nationals back home. Do you share that optimism? Do you believe that is likely to happen anytime in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, Neha, if you do not think positively, then the chances of getting a positive result is very less. And in such a situation, when things are going bad, At least India is a country which is trying its best. We are thinking, we are proactive, we are dynamic, we are trying to exploit the situation. We are trying to find out some breakthrough between these two groups that they agree for a ceasefire, or maybe one of the group like military group manages to take a control of the whole area, that we can speak to them and evacuate our people at the earliest. Our aim should be that when we are going to evacuate our people, we must take our logistic supply in terms of medicine, in terms of other food items, so that we can give to them, give to the people of Sudan. So therefore, it seemed to be lucrative for them. They will allow the Indian aircraft to land there. So I suppose to be positive is also one of the solutions. You know the situation is hopeless. You know there is a civil war type situation. You know there is no safe corridor. As of today, aircraft landing there in the airfield in Khartoum is almost out of question. But so it be. Keep on evolving a solution. Keep on talking to both the groups. Possibly they may agree, because after all, both of them are generals. They understand as to how hierarchy functions. Country like India has a friendship all over across the world, and they know it. The India has never
India
exploited
certainly
anyone.
enjoys a lot of
Possibility
goodwill.
of
You're right in
possibility of
pointing that out. That's exactly what Ambassador Vora is saying too. India enjoys a lot of goodwill. Can we leverage that in these circumstances? Michael, if I could give you the last word very quickly, what would you want the international community to do under the current circumstances? Do you believe India can help?
Yes, India and people in the region, the countries and international community. It is only to put pressure on both warring parties, the both warring generals, to observe the ceasefire, because when there is no corridor, when there is no humanitarian safe and passage for this current war which is going on, it is going to be difficult for any country, including India, to make an evacuation process. And it is also going to be very difficult for people, for Sudanese themselves who are currently living in this war. They're also going to face it very hard with the humanitarian situation. So any pressure on both parties at the moment is the only solution for them to really cease fire and and allow the process to take place.
That is the million-dollar question, Michael. Can the international community put enough pressure on the warring parties to declare a ceasefire? That is what Sudan needs right now. As I said at the start of the show, our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Sudan, and we certainly hope that this fighting comes to an end sooner rather than later. On that note, Michael Atate, Ambassador Deepak Vohra and Major General A.K. Sivaj, thank you so much for joining me on the show and sharing your perspective with us on this very crucial story. Well, the developments in Sudan and Indians being stranded there and how they're going to be rescued and evacuated from there is a story that we here at News9 will continue to track very closely for you. But for now, it's a wrap on the show. Thanks for watching.